Hello, and welcome to Wylde. I will be making a relatively impromptu video where I'm going to show you all how we wrap presents in my family. Now my grandmother and my mother, they were real artisans at this. I owe them an incredible debt of gratitude, and I'm nowhere near as good at it as either of them. But I am going to try and pass on what I do remember that they taught me, so that all of you guys can see some easy way to wrap a present so that the wrapping paper kind of fits the thing you're wrapping. Okay, so let's get started. And again, this was sort of impromptu, so please forgive the normal state of the house. So first thing you're going to need is a big flat surface. Well, I guess first thing you're probably going to need is a present. Yeah, something that you need to wrap. Now, I like to reuse boxes. You should reuse boxes too. There's no need to cut down new trees just to get a box, because we've been in quarantine times for a while, so we've all got a lot of stuff from Amazon and other delivery sources. You can use cereal boxes, shoe boxes, beer boxes, anything that you got delivered. I mean, the number of boxes that we end up throwing away, and then I see people going out to buy boxes for gifts, is kind of silly. So, got a reused box here. Got my present inside it, nice and well tucked away. Just went out and I bought this wrapping paper at the corner store. So yeah, you got your present, get your nice flat surface area. The reason you need a nice flat wide surface area is so you can roll the paper out. Now, if you get those individual sheets of paper, it still applies even though you're not rolling it. You can do this on the floor too, just make sure that it's clean first. I had to wipe down the table before we begin. There's always some volume of ambient dust around, and when that gets on your wrapping paper as you're rolling it around, it not only might look unappealing, it can make the tape not want to stick to the paper down the line. So you got your flat surface, you got your wrapping paper, you got your gift, scissors. Now you're going to want a good pair of scissors if at all possible. Now I know that sounds silly, of course you want a good pair of scissors, but scissors get dull and they get dull quickly. And in order to do what you want to do with wrapping paper, you can't go with scissors that have been dulled too terribly much, or you're going to get a very uneven finish on the edge of your cuts. All right. Bows and ribbon are nice, but they're not necessary. These are extras. So let's get started. Quick thing right off the bat with the wrapping paper. Wrapping paper tends to come with some section that's going to have a bit of like a label on it that makes the exterior plastic a little harder than the rest of the exterior plastic. That sounds like a silly thing to point out, but here's why. When you open the exterior plastic to the wrapping paper, you can fold it down and you can keep that end. And then you can put the wrapping paper back in its own plastic when you're done. In fact, a simple thing that I used to do when I was a kid, and I'm going to go ahead and do again. I'm going to take some tape. I'm just going to create a small reinforced lip on the exterior plastic. Okie doke. And you tear one end, fold the plastic down, then grab it by the other end and pull it out. Now you've got yourself a little wrapping paper sock. You can try and squeeze it back into afterwards. Throw that to the side. Push these over here. So much debris. Take my gift, set it there. Okay, and cord's in the way. All right. Now you got your wrapping paper. Now you can roll it out however works best. I tend to go long ways, meaning I will set the roll at a 90 degree to the length of my surface. You don't have to. You can just as easily go where you're rolling it this way. It doesn't matter to your surface as much as it matters to the gift that you're wrapping, okay? So let's get our gift. And now this next part is the real secret of getting the gift wrapping to fit. Just to keep that from rolling off the edge. pull that guy out. Good. Okay, now, you've got your gift, you've got your wrapping paper. If you can find the paper that has these little grid lines inside, that's really useful, but it's not necessary for our purposes. Part of the reason that I wrap this way, that my family wrapped this way, is because it conserves wrapping paper. And wrapping paper is expensive and fancy, and shouldn't be wasted if we don't have to. So you take your gift, and in order to measure out the sides, all you gotta do is roll it over. So, just eyeballing it, looking at my length here, and the shape of my box, I can probably cover each side if I put this shortwise across. Let me see if I can get my camera a little more height so you can see that a little better. Oh look, I found another box. Who would have thought? Like I said, it's impromptu. Okay, well, it's not a big difference, but it's there. All right, so taking my gift, you line it up to the edge of your wrapping paper, okay? The first thing you do, you go all the way to the corner, and then if I'm planning on doing it this way, what I'm going to end up doing is rolling it over on its sides like that, okay? Now, before I do that, I know that that's my initial plan. I'm also going to check this side. The very far corner, it's going to be standing up, and you'll see why in a moment. Now, when I do my quick measure, so I just lay it down, wide side, narrow side, wide side, narrow side. And as you can probably see, that leaves a lot of wrapping paper left over. So, I might have to double check this. I'm going to try it long ways. So instead of going like that, I'm going to go long ways. And you can start from the narrow or the wide, it doesn't matter. So wide side, narrow side, wide side, narrow side. Okay? Looks like either way works pretty darn well, in fact. You okay in there? Good. Simultaneous to my wrapping video, Becky is putting lights on the tree, and of course the needles are just springing off like a cholla cactus. Alright, so let's finally do this for reals, not for play. Gonna just push that back, get you guys a good angle. Okay, so we're going long ways to this length, starting off in our corner. All right. Now, if you do this correctly, you don't need to leave yourself any room for error. I always leave room for error because you know what life has? Lots of error. So I'm going to take it a little bit of extra on this end and a little bit of extra on this end so that I know that I have a little bit of wiggle room. Because the world is not a terribly precise reality. So, since what I'm wrapping is a box, it's got 4 sides. You can literally just count it out. 1 side.
Oh, wow.
2 side. 3 side. 4 side. So technically, I could cut it right here. And because I've got this part of measured to this width of the box, that means when you fold it over, it's going to meet halfway on both sides. You may have done this experiment back in school, but it's a 3-dimensional to 2-dimensional concept experiment. If we've got one edge, that's the correct width here, and then we get all 4 of the other edges, then by wrapping it over, that will be the entire length of the box. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. But this is the primary thing to remember. Start at your corner. Leave some error room. Okay? And then start with a side. Square, 4 sides, 4 times over. 1. Hold it steady. 2. Hold it steady. 3. Hold it steady. 4. Now the reason I keep saying hold it steady is that when you're rolling it over, it's really easy for the box to accidentally slide on the wrapping paper. And if it slides over every time you pick it up and roll it over, then you're going to lose your positioning and you're not going to have enough paper. So as you go from one edge to the next, you want to be very careful that you're not sliding it along the paper in the process. Wow, I do not like that angle on me. Hey, yay! All right, so now this is where we know we want to stop. Easiest thing to do at this point you just cut a little measuring slit. Again, never a bad idea to leave yourself some room for error. So just give it a snip, and then you do the same thing. So that measures our distance going this direction. Now I need to measure our distance going that direction, which is going to line up with basically here. And since I've got this one, I don't need to keep this on this part, so I can go ahead and take it back. Get my starting.
Yeah, we're just doing the white elephant, so as long as you just get your white elephant.
So now we just got to get our distance this way, because we got our distance this way, okay? So I'm going back to the corner, got my narrow side, and then my wide side. And snip it. Okay, now because I was describing the process the whole time, that took a really long time. If you want to see what it looks like without describing it the whole time, I'm going to start over so you can just see it from scratch, okay? All right, so if this was just starting from scratch, come to the table. Got my gift. Got my wrapping paper. And roll it out. Get something to hold it down and keep it from falling off the edge of the table. Got my present. Measure the edge, leave some room. Okay, so got that. Now I just come over here for the width. Got my width. 1, 2, 3, 4. Got my measure. Come back. 1, 2. All right, now we got to cut our paper down. Now you can just snip, 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 or you can do the nifty cool way. Hopefully this will work on camera. Get it into the paper. Can you even see that? There we go. So get it in, cut down a little bit, and then run it along. And this is why you want sharp scissors. You have to keep the paper taut while you're sliding it. If it gets a wrinkle in the paper, then it's gonna hiccup. Eyeball it about to where you need. Close your scissors. Come from your other snip, your measured out snip. Get your paper in the scissors. Bring it down a little bit. Slide it along. And the last bit is the surgery part. You gotta be careful and close. Okay. Whew. Well, that took 15 minutes just to get our paper cut, but it only took.
I wish I had started this.
1 minute? Once we removed all the initial discussion. Oh, right. So now I've got my paper. Roll it back up on my roll. I'm gonna take my sock.
That's actually what French toast is. It's basically like bread pudding over soap. Yeah.
That takes more time than I'd like. So we slide that in there, put it off to the side. That part's now done. Okay. And this is all the paper that we need. Now, because I went long ways on this, it's going to be a little harder to pull up the wraparound. It's not going to be a big problem. Let's see if I can change angle a bit. Maybe I can cover that with some folding. Okay, I got to hold the paper to keep it from curling up on me. Got to hold the paper to keep it from curling up on me. And then this is one of the small things that people don't usually think about. Oftentimes your box will have a more visually desirable top to it. You're going to want whatever you want the top to be in the center of your paper, because you want the bottom of your box to be where all the paper comes together. The goal is to try and hide the seams as much as possible. So I want this to be the top, so we can put that there. I'm going to just eyeball that, roughly center. Pull this up to here. Pull that up to there. Awesome. Now, oftentimes, you're going to have to play around with it to try and get your edges to line up. What I mean by that is where this part of the paper and this part of the paper, because it's all one edge wrapped around, you want it to be basically seamless so that when you bring them together, there's no little stair step between the two. You want to go with your factory cut edge for measuring, if at all possible, because that's going to always be flatter than your personally cut edge. This is pretty close, but not quite. So you just have to drop a little bit. Change the angle on your box.
And it's great that it's not like fresh, because that's why I sliced it up like early, because you want it to be a little bit dry. So custard better.
There we go. All right, small amount of tape to hold the plastic, and don't pull your paper too tight. If you pull your paper too tight, then while you're wiggling it around, you're going to tear at the corners. Don't leave a lot of room, but let it breathe a little bit, okay? Let it breathe a bit.
Yeah, like we'll just make it wet. We don't want to just give people soggy bread. Okay, we'll cook soggy bread.
Now, at this point, if you want to, you can pull out a ruler. And with your ruler, you can go in on either side, check the distance. You want it to be roughly centered. It's not a huge deal if it's uneven, as long as each flap goes over the midway point. And this is why when we measured earlier, we put the narrow edge down first along our bottom line, okay? So you put that across the bottom to figure out the width that you're going to need. Remember how I said later that would be explained? So because we measured the width and then we just rolled over 4 times, we know that every side is covered. When you do that, then each of these flaps should go down about halfway. And that's why you leave yourself a little bit of extra room. That's why I said make room for mistakes. You also leave room for the paper to overlap. If it's done too perfectly, then the seams will literally line up and you have this weird seam in the middle, and then the paper won't quite make it. Something that you'll notice with experimenting, but always leave a little bit of extra. So once we've got our paper roughly centered, we take our edges, we fold them down. Now there's a couple of different ways to do this. You can set your paper on the flat surface so that when you fold it down, you've got something to push against, like this. See how when I pull it here, then I've got the table where the fold is happening. So I can press up against the package, not hard, just enough to fold the paper over. And you take your other finger and you just crease it along the table. So that's one technique. Nothing wrong with that. You have to be careful that this stays flat all the way. That's one of the hard parts, is keeping this flap flat against the package as you make this crease. But you don't have to get that complicated with it. You can just sort of fold over the edge, and then the important thing is that this flap is flat against this side. So as long as you're doing that, you can just sort of play with it some and go, okay. Now, I'm pinching it so that where this part of the flap that folds down, I can feel it with my thumb on the other side. So I know that this is flat, pinching it together, and I can get my seam like that. The benefit to that is you don't have to roll your package around as much. Sometimes with bigger packages, it's really hard to roll. Sometimes it's just the paper doesn't want to hold its position, so it's hard to roll. So whether you lay it on the table so you can have something to push against, or if you just leave it in the air, either way works fine. So the way that I'm doing this here, this is going to create a single top flap. You can also do small corner flaps. I'll show the small corner flaps on the other. So we got one of our long edges. Oh, and you always start off on your open edge, okay? Don't start off on the solid piece. Start off where they come together. You'll find out why in a bit. Okay, so we got these 2 flaps done. Now starting with the one that's underneath where it lays over. So starting on this side, bring it in. I don't know how easy it's going to be able to see. Fold it over. Again, you're trying to keep this part flat against the package if at all possible. You can tape it if you want to. Now, Grammy would be mad at me if I used tape to hold it steady while I did this. So I'm not gonna. Okay, so you see what I did? I brought this in. I kept this part flat, brought this part in, and then I pushed it down until it got to the table, and then I created my seam, or my crease. And we're going to do the same thing over here.
I mean, casseroles were kind of like the 90s thing.
Okay.
Like it was kind of like that research.
So now we've got all these folds in, all these creases. We haven't used a single piece of tape yet. Okay. I'm going to get one piece of tape out. Oftentimes you'll get your tape out ahead of time. You just rip it off, put it on the edge of the table, and there you go, you got your tape. Okay. Now the last part, this is the trickiest part, trying to keep everything flat while also folding up. To get your last edge, fold it up, and before you tape it, make sure everything is pushed in to where you want it to go. Because you want all of your folds and your creases to be tight and inside. So make sure everything is tight and inside. No, my Sharona was early 80s. Okay. And then just got my one piece of tape. Put it across the seam here. And there you go. Now it's upside down at the moment because remember, we have the top of our present was on the bottom when we laid it down. So it's going to look like this. Remember I said that's a single flap? I'm going to show you how to do a two-corner, okay? So switching to the other side. So this is what we just got done. Folded that up, put the tape on, give it some fingernail to make it solid. We're going to set it on that edge just so that the package can slide down into it. You want to do that just to make sure that you don't have too much loose space. Like I said, let it breathe, but not too loose. Too loose gets too many wrinkles. All right, so we go there, and here's how it's going to be a little bit different when you make the small edge flaps. This was a long edge flap. We're going to do small edge flaps for this one. Same starting principle. Start with your inside small flap on where it comes together. But now, so after we got our initial two creases done, just like we did before, okay, got our two creases here, but instead of folding this in this way, we're going to take our long flap and fold it up, okay? Now, when you take your long flap and you fold it up, one of the things that you may notice is that this is going to have too much material on it. Let me see if I can move my camera. There we go. So we took our long flap, we got our two creases, get a long flap, fold it up, and then when it comes over, you'll notice it's getting a little ornery. Just go ahead and take your finger, curve it in here, let that fold over, and you can see how it's folding over in on itself and creating a new crease over the old crease. That's fine. This crease ended all the way down here. We're going to make a new point probably right around there. Okay, so now we have tiny flap on the end. Now this way, when you make tiny flaps, you're going to need a bit more tape because you're going to have two different tape points. With a single large flap, the benefit is you only need one piece of tape because the big flap holds everything together. When you make tiny flaps, you need two pieces of tape because each end has to have its own tape holding it down. Okay, so like that. And then the same thing over here. Again, the principle of keeping it tight. What's wrong? And there you go. So that's the tiny flaps. You need two pieces of tape and you've got these little corners on either narrow edge, or you could do large flap. Now, the benefit to tiny flaps is that oftentimes it'll create a more solid wrap because you don't have one long piece trying to hold it all down. The negative is it takes more tape in the process. Okay, so now that we've got our present wrapped, cool. Now that we've got our present wrapped, you have an option. One of the things that you can do is if you take your fingers, put them close together, you can even have them touching, and just go around the edges like this. You're shaping the paper to get a sharper edge. It's literally going to put a mild fold into the paper to create a more distinct and angular edge. It'll be more of a solid, sharper edge to it. That's not always desirable. This is an extra thing you can do if you want your package to have a more angular and distinct corners and edges to it. Not everybody likes that. It's not necessary, but it's something you can do. So now we've got it wrapped, okay? We could be done here. We're not, because I'm crazy. Actually, no, we're gonna stop here. I'll make it a second video about ribbon.